Just need to unmute the.
Hello, can you hear me there, Annalise? Yes, you can. Great. Okay. Do you want to check the comms from your end, so make sure that we can hear you?
Morena?
No, we've got nothing. Say something else.
Morena, can you hear me now?
No, we're not getting anything from here. Ladies and gentlemen, we're just going to hold 1 minute while we sort out the comms with Annalisa.
I can hear you. You can't hear me?
Might be.
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we're not picking anything you're saying up there, Annalisa. There's nothing at your end, is there?
Check. Can you hear me now?
No, nothing. Visually, we're seeing you, but just not audibly hearing you.
Yeah. Okay, I might
There's a suggestion. Go through, Sam. Shane.
Good morning, Annalisa. Potentially it'll be under your sound settings, but you've probably already tried that. Going to your speakers on your.
right.
Yeah, she's just going to try. Yep. There's nothing stopping her.
Bottom right-hand corner speaker.
Okay.
Or if you've got headphones, plug those in, it should connect straight away.
Did you hear that, Annalise? If you've got headphones, your headphones might just connect straight away.
Okay.
Hello, right.
Can you hear me now?
So we've got nothing from you.
Okay, let me try my
Get an IT person to speak to her. Annalise, should I ring you? And we've got the IT person here who might be able to offer some suggestions.
yeah. Actually, let me.
I'm just gonna ring her and then.
Good morning. I might
Yeah.
just try on my phone.
Yeah. Okay.
It's faster.
Okay. Yeah.
So I'll log off here.
Yeah. So she. I'll bring her back because she probably can come back on. I know, apparently we had a disconnect at our end. Thank you everyone for bearing with us as we get through this technical glitch. All the online people and everyone else.
Good morning. Can you
Hundreds
hear
of
me
online
now?
people, I would imagine. Right, let's try now.
Can you hear me now? No?
No, it's still not hearing you.
Annalise, do you have Teams on your phone?
Teams I'm good with.
I would come in via your iPhone if you can, in case it is an issue with regards to your laptop.
Hey, how doing?
Oh, they're coming through loud and clear. No, it's not Teams I'm fine with. It's because it's Zoom, but I have used Zoom from this laptop before with no problem. So maybe just start because you're going to just start because I don't want to hold people up, and I can try and, can you see my chat function? Worst case scenario. Okay, and let me try and fix it while you start. Well, no, because I've used Zoom many times at call into meetings, so I'm not sure why I'm not getting any, but I might try and get someone to help me. I'll turn my camera off, but you start. All right. Okay. Let me try and get a friend in here to help me see if there is something going on. But you start, and then yeah, I might. So what I might do is I might just say a couple of words, and someone give me a thumb up if you can hear me, and then I know I'm good. All right. Okay. Thanks. Bye.
Right, welcome everyone. Thank you for your patience as we're trying to get this tech sorted out with Annalisa. We're still obviously still haven't quite sorted out. So Annalisa is going to be leading the meeting. I'm chairing it from this point here, but she's still leading the meeting. We'll start with a karakia. So whakatakata ki te uru, whakatakata ki te tonga, kia ma kina kina ki uta, kia ma taratara ki tai. E hiaki ana te atakura, he tio, he huka, he hohu, ti he mori ora. We've got the item on the agenda for the day is the draft annual report for the year. So I will pass over to you.
Thank you and good morning. So firstly, apologies for this being a little bit late. I think Sharon, you wanted to do a little bit of an opening as well.
Yes. Yeah, thank you. Thank you and welcome, Julian. Look, we're firstly apologies. I know that the report was not circulated till about 4:20 last night, and I appreciate that that is a little bit frustrating. We've had to undertake quite a lot of work to get to the point of getting the report circulated, and I think it would be fair to say that after we've been through this this audit process, ourselves and Julian and his team will do a bit of a post-audit debrief as to what worked well, what didn't, and how we can work better together in the future. And so, but the team will take you through the highlights of the report. And generally, there's a good news story here. So, in terms of, I'm proud of what the team have achieved. So, but again, just extending that apologies for the late circulation.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sharon.
you hear me
I
now?
ask people to go to page 5 in Diligent, we'll start off with the annual report highlights. So I'll talk through the key things that's happened throughout the year. Craig Moody is also here as well. If there's some more detailed questions, Craig's the accounting manager. So as Sharon said, this is a good news story. So reporting an after-tax surplus of 34 million. It is a little bit down in the previous year, but there's obviously reasons for that. So just looking at the first table, which is the summary financial performance, I'm not going to go through this line by line, but you can see within there where our key sort of variances are in the year. Obviously, just drawing attention to the development and the financial contributions. Our budget there, 10.8 versus our actual 20.4, which again, very good news. Our operating expenses, obviously we budgeted 150, that's came in at 166. There's a number of reasons for that. We were in some cases late in some recruitment, so that cost includes some consulting spend, some IT spend, and some legal, external legal fees as well. And other expenses above budgets, including building levies, some IT licenses, and some ongoing maintenance on reserves as well. Just sort of moving on to sort of page 6. I mean, overall revenue in the year, 198, which again, quite a good number, 25 million higher than what we'd expected. And I think it's just worth noting that if we start to go into financial statements, that we are still carrying a good cash position. We do need to be very careful where we're at with that cash position as we go into LTP and look at projects, etc. But I mean, overall in the year, our financials are looking in a good shape. We've gone through quite a rigorous process with Audit New Zealand, with our valuations. I'm not going to talk much to the valuations because that paper was tabled, I think, back in October, but I can go back and refresh anyone's minds or answer any questions on that. I will just pause there and take any questions.
Right. No, there are no questions.
Okay. So let's just...
Oh, sorry. Thank you. Shane.
Tēnā rā tātou katoa, e mihi ana ki a katoa e koromatua, kai whaka haere. Kai mahi, thank you very much for the effort that's gone in acknowledging staff and Julian for your efforts that have gone into getting this at such short notice, and acknowledging the apologies for the late, circulating of the agenda and the annual report at late notice. I guess it's one of those things that we continue to ask for. If we can have the information early as governors, then we can diligently work through and come up with questions that I'm sure we will be asked from, I will be, from our constituents or residents going through it. So it's important that from my perspective as a governor that I understand and have clear answers for some of the obvious questions that will come through. So favourably on page 5, the word compares favourably. There's a difference of, okay, I haven't written it down now, but there's a big difference here between 165 and 149. Is that considered favourable? Will be one of the questions I know that will come through.
Which figures you? Oh, yep.
So that's operating expenses.
Yeah, our council's core operating expenditure in the year was 165.9 million, which compares favourably with the budget of one.
No, that's actually going the other way.
The other way. Yeah.
So we've actually overspent there.
Yes.
And I think sort of mentioned that a lot of that expenditure is with some of that's with consultants. We've got some legal fees, increased costs on IT licenses, etc.
Yes.
So we will obviously look at that and make sure that's reflected in operating budgets going forward, so we don't have variances.
Okay.
I think the other thing that's just worth noting as well, within this annual report, there has been a new sort of accounting standard, which means this is part of the reason why this was a little bit delayed as well. So some of the service reporting disclosures that are within here that Julian might want to talk to later as well. So we've had to go into a little bit more detail with what we disclose in that space.
Right. Annalisa, are you with us?
Can you hear me now? Hello?
If you're saying something, Annalisa, we still can't hear you. So, okay, sorry, carry on. Hello, can you hear us, Annalisa?
I can hear you, but no.
I'm going to call you on my phone, Annalisa, and I'm going to we'll do it through that way. Old school. Very, very old school.
Phil, while you're doing that, we're going to run through the report. Like you just covered the intro, we're going to actually run through the report.
So I'm going to go straight
No,
to
that's
the
all right.
financial statements component. If you want to go to page 73, which is our statement of comprehensive
You're going to
income.
speak through my microphone.
So this is a much more detailed breakdown of, we've
I'm
got
just gonna
both
put you
council
down.
and
Can
we've
you-
also got group as well within there. Sorry, I'm going to wait until.
Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can. Yeah. Okay, so where are we at? Right, you're on.
Page 73.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Apologies. Thank you, Alison, very much for presentation of the annual report, and appreciate the hard mahi that you and the team have got to get through today. Just picking up on a couple of those comments. Again, I've been able to hear you all very loud and clear. Unfortunately, you can't be able to hear me, but you know, we did receive this report a couple of weeks ago, which I think, you know, it was a late withdrawal from the pack, so I'm sure we all went through the annual report then. What I was keen to hear this morning, Alison, which may be a combination of yourself and Julian, is just those key changes, I guess, that have happened in the last couple of weeks. And I know around any of the judgmentals or and also maybe the second thing on the agenda for Julian or yourself is just with the report, any other emphasis of matters that may be in draft that are consistent to the prior year. I know we've Julian talked about 3 waters, but if there's any others that have rolled forward from the prior year, I'd be quite keen to hear about those as well. So that was kind of going to be my focus of this morning, was just to highlight the key changes that have happened in the last couple of weeks.
Okay, thanks, Annalisa. So the main changes from when the report was tabled previously, or when the report was in the pack previously to where we are just now, is actually on the disclosures. There's very few changes to the numbers. So within, I think it's PBS, is it 48, Julian, correct me if I'm wrong here? We have been required to put in a lot more service reporting narrative within there. So we've had a number of conversations back with Audit New Zealand to make sure what we had included in the report hits the mark in terms of what the standard requires. So that is primarily where our delays have been in that. The financial statements themselves have remained broadly static. I think it's also worth noting we do have one outstanding item, which is just closing out our capital commitments disclosure that won't affect the primary statements, i.e. your P&L and balance sheet, but we have a disclosure there to recognise what our capital commitments liability is, which is essentially all our projects that are contracted but monies that have not been spent yet. So we've still got that one outstanding, but it shouldn't materially change the numbers. Annalisa, does that give you enough detail?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I mean, just running through back to, I'm going to page 73 on diligent, and I'm not going to go through this line by line, but this is a full breakdown of our P&L. So you can see line by line our rates, breakdown of our revenue, breakdown of our expenditure, and so on. I'll open that up to any questions there.
Are there any questions? I have to make a comment here that having only had the report for less than 17 hours, it's difficult to maybe you need to coach us through this a wee bit further. But as in, but yeah,
So, I'll start with the top, just going through from a revenue standpoint. So overall in the year, we've got 198, which again is a good news story. It's exceeding our budget, which was 173. If I go down rates, there or thereabouts what we'd expected. Development contributions, again, higher than budget, as I mentioned earlier. Our fees and charges are broadly where we'd expected them to land. Again, subsidies and grants, there or thereabouts, and other revenue, which includes a whole lot of lease income, etc. That's better than what we'd expected, which overall has given us quite a good news, 20 and ahead of where we'd expected to be. So I'll move on to expenditure if there are no questions from a revenue standpoint.
Any questions on that revenue side? I just have one. The other revenue, obviously, it's a 16 or 20% increase on do we know what that's? Have we identified where that's come from, or what is that, broadly speaking?
I'm going to hand over to Craig. Craig, if you want to cover that one.
Yes. So it's the other revenue variance is largely associated with vested asset revenue, which is 5.4 million above.
Have you got your microphone on there?
Just move it here.
Bit far away. Bit quiet, sorry. So the main variance is related to other revenue is your vested asset revenue, which is 5.4 million above budget. So that's your non-cash infrastructure and assets that are derived to the council from developers, and also some land sales associated with the Rolleston Town Centre, which were 2.2 million above budget, and that was just due to the timing of the sale of the land in the Rolleston Town Centre.
Okay, thank you. And the other question I have is around the term that it says gains. It's just an open figure of 4.8 million. What does that relate to?
Craig, are you happy to answer that one as well, please?
Yeah, so the gains largely relate to gains and movement in investment property valuation. So there's like 2.7 million, and also fair value movements in the council's interest rate swaps, which were 1.1 million above budget.
Thank you. And all that information is in the report. Okay. So yes, it looked at having not had been able to go through it in the depth that I would like to. Shane, I see you have a question.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The land sales revenue, Craig, the 2.2 million, where is that allocated to? The revenue from that, does that get put into an account for further investment, or where does that normally get allocated to?
So at this stage, that money hasn't been allocated anywhere in particular. That's related to the Rolleston Town Centre land sales. So that's a decision that needs to be made.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Sam.
Yeah, I'm wondering how the percentages of income and of the different areas of income relates to previous years. And I'm thinking that as we've grown over time, and you might not have done this analysis yet, but I think it'd be just like thinking, are we growing more rates revenue and not equally growing our development contributions or subsidies and grants, or are they all growing at about the same amount? Like, how's the dynamics around our revenue shifted as it comes in from different areas year on year? Has there been any thought to look back since, I don't know, a few years ago, and how that's changed over time? Has that work been done?
Craig, I'll take that one. A good question. We have not gone into that level of detail on the analysis yet. It is something we need to look at and make sure we capture correctly as part of the long-term plan process, and look at that movement year on year. Are things tracking the way we'd expect it to? Is things in balance, etc.? But we've not done that work yet.
Annalise, anything from you?
Probably a little bit more from Sam's great question, which is when I had planned to kind of introduce this morning, I wanted to talk about the fact that the annual report is a really good opportunity to tell the story. And I think I've said this every year, is that, you know, it's not just about our financial numbers, because we get that every quarter, you know, in our hui, but it's also about our performance and being able to tell the community of the great mahi that we've done through the year. But I also want to, and this year, you know, has been you know, challenging with, you know, different circumstances and the delays that we've had, and we're not quite at Christmas for sign-off, so there's a little improvement from prior year, but hopefully next year, you know, we'll be closer to, you know, the deadline that we're actually working towards. So, but I still want us to, and maybe it's, you know, the first quarter of next year, but actually just think in this annual report process how we can continuously get better and how this report can get better with telling that story. So probably a higher level add-on from Sam's comment around, are we telling the right story? And, you know, yes, it's been the same story for the last, or ever since I've been here, isn't it? It's like, you know, growth higher than budget, higher than expected. You know, the population keeps continuing, but exactly what Sam said, you know, is that, you know, it's the bottom line number that actually matches it. Is it in within our expectation? And, you know, how does that match? I think we can do better with telling that story. So, you know, when we get to reset kind of first quarter next year, let's just think about, you know, how we can make this annual report get better and better every year. I mean, this year was about getting it done, wasn't it, Alison? But, you know, next year when we're kind of resetting and we have the opportunity to kind of work through and be a bit more streamlined in the process, let's just look at the opportunities to make this annual report just get better and better. I mean, for me, you know, the golden lights would be that we'd be putting this annual report up for Julian will know the annual report of the year. You know, it just looks so good. It tells such a great story that it is something that we're really proud of. And I'm proud of the team for getting there, you know, because there's a lot of information in here and it's a lot of hard work. I have been on that side of the fence. I know how much work management have done just to get over the line. So don't underestimate that. And also, I just want to remind the committee that we did actually have this report 3 weeks ago. And as Alison has referred to, it's just the disclosures that have changed. So I don't want that to be documented that, you know, we've only had this annual report for 17 hours, because it's probably a little bit unfair. I think management have been working really hard to get us where we need to. So yeah, that's it for me. But let's not become kind of status quo. Let's, you know, first quarter next year, let's think how we can even get this annual report even better.
Thanks, Annalise. I think probably that's a good point about the 17 hours. However, there is normally the assumption would be that the councillors who form the committee would have had the ability to digest it more fully than they have this report. The assumption was that even though the report has been substantially the same, it's a new report that was given to the committee 17 hours ago, which is not enough time to digest. So with the assumption that we can only have that and we hear it around this table a lot, I'll take the report as being read, cannot be taken in this case here. So over to you for the next line down, which is the expenses. So it's just going to take us a wee bit more time to get through this report today.
Thanks. And I think, Annalisa, just to sort of top and tail your comments there, we will be working with Audit New Zealand, but also within the team to make sure we're planning this earlier. And I think one of the key things is bringing evaluations forward. So historically, they've always started, that process sort of kicks off late June, early July. We're actually bringing that forward to April, and we've agreed that with Audit New Zealand as well, which actually takes a lot of work out of finance. We bring that forward as well. We're looking at the balance sheet reconciliations, which form a large part of this, doing those on a monthly, quarterly basis. And the key thing being planning. And again, sort of running through with Julian and his team around almost a mini post-mortem, what did go well, what didn't, and how can we improve that.
Okay, so on to the expenses portion of that page that you're on.
Okay, so running through, we're still on page 73. Our personnel costs, I'm not going to say much about those because they're broadly bang on around what we'd budgeted. Our depreciation amortization, we come in at 44.7 versus a budget of 38. So we have gone over there. I'll let Craig talk to the detail if required, but in summary, we had under budgeted in that space. Craig, was there anything else you wanted to add to that?
other than the fact it's just related to the movement in the valuations in the previous year. So when we set the budget, that was prior to the valuation information being available.
And I'm not necessarily going to go back into the full valuation report. That did go to an October meeting, but if there's any pressing questions on that, happy to cover those. Okay.
So any questions on the expenses part of that report, that page? Okay, thank you very much. Carry on.
There's not really much else to sort of run through on this. I mean, the rest of the stuff in the fair value movement on unlisted shares, again, that's sort of gone back to the valuation piece we've covered earlier. So I'm going to close covering the P&L component at this point. And if there are any other questions, if not, we'll move on to what is our balance sheet.
Okay, any other questions on the P&L part before we move on? Annalise, you want to add anything?
No, not for me.
Okay, so moving on to page 74, our statement of financial position. I mean, again, we've still got a very healthy balance sheet. Running through that, our cash position, we're still looking quite healthy, but I will just put a note of caution there that we do have a lot of projects coming up, and that cash will reduce quite quickly if we're not very careful. So I think there's a note of caution. We need to keep a close eye on that one. But as it stands for year end, we're still in a good position. Our receivables, that is higher than what we'd expected it to be. So we do have some work that we need to do in our age debt collection. It's not the entire balance there, but that's part of it. Other financial assets, there's not really much comments I'd want to make in that unless anyone has any questions.
I have a question, but Shane, we'll start with you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you very much for the for this part of the report. Wondering how we need to move the financial policy, how that may affect, or has that been taken into account with the financial position of the council? How does that?
Are we talking, sorry, Shane, are we talking the revenue and finance policy
Yes,
that's part of long-term plan?
Yeah,
So
our long-term plan.
Yeah, so we've got that in draft form just now. So I think that will be socialised at one of the workshops next week.
Okay.
So
no bearing at this stage on this report?
Not at this point.
Okay,
no.
Thank you.
Annalise, anything from you?
Not on the asset side of the balance sheet, no, all good.
Just one small thing. You mentioned that we're going to have to keep a close eye on some of our project expenditure. Is that to keep a close eye? Is how is that planned to be? How are we going to keep a close eye on things?
I think we need to. Well, we're obviously going to work through this as part of the long-term plan, but it's just good sort of corporate governance that we'd keep a close eye on our projects and also expenditure in a whole.
So will they be brought back to council or back to here, or?
Well, they'll be socialised as part of long-term plan, and Jen will continue to report on the projects, the high-value ones, as part of our monthly or 6-weekly report as the Finance and Performance Committee.
Yeah, sure.
I was going to say exactly that. The project reports come through to the Finance Committee, and obviously if there's any risk outside of that, that would come to the Risk and Audit Committee, but there's a good reporting framework there in place.
Fantastic, thank you. Moving on.
So moving into our non-current asset space, I mean, I think the key one to probably talk to here is property, plant and equipment, which is 2.5. Again, we've got a little bit of a valuation component in there. If there's any more detailed questions, then I'll turn to Craig if anyone has any other questions in that space.
Perhaps actually Craig could just give a little bit of a summary around that, because then that might elicit some questions.
Yes, so in terms of the PPE space, the main movements there are against budget is the valuation movements in the previous financial year where we valued the water assets and the roading assets, and they increased substantially. this year we valued just the roading assets. We didn't value the water assets again this year, but that's where the main movements are, and just general additions for capital expenditure during the year.
So I'm just getting my head around what that line says. Okay, any Sam?
Yeah, so I guess this is around future changes for the valuations, particularly, I guess the three water stuff that won't be as current, and with the lifts and costs over the last 18 months, what sort of liability will we be looking at next year around that lift, and then the needs to fund any renewal program based on a lift in the valuations? Has there been any sort of work looked at that for the waters category?
Bit of a crystal ball, I guess. Know what's going to happen. But
crystal balls since they're the best ones are in China.
Thank you, Julian, for your insights.
You might.
I think as Craig, just to sort of top and tail that, I think what Craig's sort of alluding to, we are in a little bit of a waiting game just now to see what we are sort of mandated to do a little bit. In the absence of that, we'll sort of run a little bit with status quo for the time being. There could be movements in many different ways in that space. And to quote Julian, there is a little bit of a crystal ball at this point in time, Sam.
I guess as if there's a revaluation of the water assets to come in the next 12 months ahead of any change, whatever that might be, like that work is still to happen ahead of, because we're 2 years out from what was in legislation currently, which we expect to change, but there will be a reevaluation ahead of that time to make sure that our values are correct before any transitions.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
Unless you're clicking your pen to get the text.
Sorry.
Okay, move on. Yep.
Okay. So we're just moving through sort of non-current liabilities. There's not really a huge amount to talk to in there. Sorry, if I skipped a part, no, maybe I have. I'm sorry. Current liabilities, I'll take that a little as read unless anyone's got any questions. I mean, it's fairly sort of standard stuff that you would expect to see in that space. And similarly with non-current liabilities as well. Just noting with our borrowings, that is below what we'd expected from a budget standpoint, but just draw people's attention back to the Treasury policy that I think is going to the Finance Performance Committee next week, where we do have that debt threshold that we're looking to move. The rest of the balance sheet, the equity, I mean, that's just a wrap up of retained earnings and the movement in this year's P&L. So I'll stop there. And if there are any other questions on the rest of the balance sheet.
Sharon.
I would just say, Alison, is there anything that you want to red flag in there for the committee to think about going into the future, or anything in there that gives you concern? And again, it may just help elicit some questions from the committee.
At this point, no.
Anything from you, Annalisa?
Thank you. Yes, I'll just comment really around the borrowing. So again, you know, the balance sheet is a current point of time. So I think there was a comment made that Treasury policy is going up for review in the next couple of weeks. And I remember in our last Audit and Risk Committee, we discussed the, I guess, the item around affordability. So it's good timing for us to be looking at, you know, at the position that we're in at a point of time, so that when we have that conversation in a couple of weeks, then we can make the right decision within that policy.
Thank you. Right, move on.
So moving on to page 75, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this one. Statement of changes in equity is really just pulling through our numbers from the previous two documents. So unless anyone has any pressing questions on that, I will move on to our cash flow on page 76. So I mean, running through our cash flow, if we take it section by section, Our first one being our net cash from our operating activities. We're sitting at 33.9 versus the budget of 27. You can see the key movements in each of the line items there. If there's no questions, we will just move on to the next section, which is investing.
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh,
Investing.
sorry, Sam.
So I'll just ask, so the payments to suppliers and employees, is that because we've done like more work and are ahead of where we are, which wasn't what I thought was happening, as opposed to just extra costs that
No,
we've
so
had to incur?
That's directly linked to, if we take you back to the operating expenditure, which was higher than budget. So that's where you're seeing the cash component linked there. So we were higher with some consulting spend, IT licenses, etc. So that's your direct correlation back into your cash component. Moving into the next part, which is investing activities. There's not a huge amount that I want to probably draw people's attention to there, but happy to take any questions at that part. Otherwise, we'll move on. No, we'll move on.
Yep.
And the rest of the cash flow, which is the financing activities. Again, there's not a huge amount to talk to in there, other than just to note we do still have quite a healthy cash position at 20.4. But like I said, we'll just note of caution there on future expenditure that is coming up, that we do need to monitor that one closely.
Thank you. Any questions on the cash flow page there? Annalise, anything from you?
No, cash flow is pretty, as Alison said, fairly generic, isn't it? It's cash coming in, cash coming out. So it is what it is. Yep.
Page 77, which takes us back onto your non-cash items and movement and capital items, etc. I'm not going to go through these in a huge amount of detail because it sort of is a little bit what it says on the tin that is quite generic in nature.
Any questions around that? Thank you.
So if I move to page 78, and this was obviously only scheduled for an hour, so I'm not going to go through our statement of accounting policies unless anyone has a real desire to talk through that in detail. Annalisa's laughing because she's hoping the answer is no there.
It is good reading, though. I do hope that you have all read it at least once in your time as an audit risk committee member, because this is how we treat our transactions throughout the organisation. So
Yeah.
I know it's a little bit dry reading, but if you haven't ever read these pages, then I encourage you to read them at least once, because it does help your learning and understanding.
I think, and thanks, Annalisa, maybe if we go to page 81, it's probably a good table that for people to actually look at as well, which just gives us a full breakdown of revenue expenditure for the group at activity level. So it's quite useful there just to see how that all gets pulled together.
Wonderful. Yep.
Okay, if there's no further questions at this point, what I'd like to do is hand over to Julian, so Julian can talk through it from the Audit New Zealand standpoint.
Well, good morning, and thank you very much for welcoming me to your audit committee. Always a pleasure to engage in person whenever possible. So, and perhaps before I talk about the audit, I just got some observations. They're not so much questions. Observations about the annual report. There's always an opportunity to refresh the presentation of the annual report, to tell a coherent story, a story about the council's achievements for the past year, and also on matters that council might want to improve on in the future years. There's a lot in the annual report which council can't change. It's because of the prescriptive nature. So a good example would be the how you present your financial prudence benchmarks. The funding impact statement, for example, is another prescriptive disclosure format. There's little scope to change anything other than the amounts that reflect council's own situation for the year. The area that I believe permits the council to showcase its reporting is in the statement of service provision, which council call activity groups or some other description, but statement of service provision is what we use legally. That is the one area where a lot of councils, and Selwyn is not alone, I would say, in its presentation that could benefit from a better storytelling. So behind those performance measures, there's always a story, and how council presents that story got to be meaningful, and they all got to hang together nicely, so that it's believable. It got to be absolutely honest. So in terms of achievements, say so. If there's not achieved objective, also say so, and what you're going to do to fix it in the next year. The new standard, which Alison and my team have been working through over the last several months, was in shaping and reshaping how the disclosure was presented. There's a lot of work in complying with that standard. Things have changed, and that standard has got big implications for us. So this year, more or less the first year. Next year it should be better. I suspect it might take 2 to 3 annual report rounds to get to a stage where we can all be proud of, I think. So that's one area that I thought I might share with you. Is this questions? I leave it to you, but that's my observation as an auditor. There are other things that again, they are just observations. The revaluation uplift in your main investments, your minority shareholding in Orion and in the wholly owned subsidiary Core, they've gone up substantially. So from time to time, council needs to look at the rationale for those investments, whether they are, giving you the returns that you desire from holding on to those investments. The new LTP round might be a time to think about it. So if not this, the next LTP round might be one after that. But always step back and ask yourselves, what are the reasons for keeping an investment? It could be for all sorts of reasons, strategic reasons and reasons of having a presence in a certain sector. But that's for council to decide. The other observations, such as the capital spend that you have budgeted for, and over which you have rated your community, for council, there's still a gap. It has always been a gap. The amount that's actually spent is a lot less than what you've budgeted for. So a ratepayer might well pose a question to council. You have rated me, but where's the product or where's the service? So that's again a question for council to mull about. Those are my observations on your annual report. The annual report is yours. Well, as an observer, I just pass on some comments. Now to my main thing. If members and management have a formidable memory, you might recall that in July I presented the annual plan, finalized annual plan, and it sets out in that audit plan, not annual plan, audit plan. The key areas that we are going to focus on in the audit. Alison has commented on those already, such as the evaluation. It's always a big thing to do. It's a hugely complex exercise for your valuers. We engage with them over discussions, and also with management. It's the exercise of judgment that's very challenging. There's always the risk of ending up with a number that doesn't look reasonable against the background unit rates, for how assets are built up. Rolling is a good example, it's so many layers, base cost, sub cost, and you may not have realistic unit rates, asset rates to build up that valuation number. So we challenge those numbers, and we have to give council the assurance that the numbers reflected in the annual report make sense. So those are the big things that I simply want to talk about in the audit. We, as Sharon mentioned, we'll have a proper debrief. There are clearly areas that we can improve ourselves as auditors, and council as preparers of the annual report can improve on. Ellison touched on the timing for valuations. We had discussions about that. The idea of bringing forward the evaluation work is critical, because valuers, like accountants and auditors, they are in short supply. I know of councils that book their valuers like 9 months ahead. They want them to do that work then. And I suspect you might do the same. The market is still pretty fluid, so the values jumping up and down. So the threshold for triggering a full revaluation is actually not very big. You're talking about between 5 to 10%. Anything over 10% is definitely, between 5 and 10 is judgmental. That's in auditing terms. So keep an eye on those things. So for the audit report, I'm pleased to say it's going to be an unmodified audit report. So in other words, it's going to be a clean audit report. There's going to be emphasis on meta paragraph, which is not a qualification or anything at all, or modification to the annual report. Rather, it is just to draw the reader's attention to something that's pretty important to the reader's understanding of the financial statements, and that's in regard to the Three Waters reform. As a signal to Ellison and some other people, the office is looking through line by line the very important coalition agreement and trying to figure out what it means for us. And my understanding is that the Auditor General's office has gone through it. They're mulling at it, and I suspect they would have had discussions within the office, and we should get an updated paragraph to share with you, hopefully before the end of this week. So I think that's really about all I want to say. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thanks, Julian. Annalise, I'll go to you first.
So just to confirm, Julian, there's no other emphasis of matter clauses?
It will cost you more. No, I'm joking. But no, there's none. Yeah. It's just the Three Waters reform.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. No, that's good. No, we are going to have auditor only time just quickly after when this hui closes. But just a question for the committee, which with management in the room as well. But is there anything that we will need to be concerned about within the management letter? I know you don't draft that for a little bit of time, but will it be fairly consistent to prior year?
Yes, it will be. There will be obviously no reference to the to any breach of law that I'm aware of. So it's a standard representation letter. I think I must share it with you previously. Just
no, so not your management rep letter, your letter to management, around internal controls and.
Oh yes, they will come. They will come.
Yeah, but nothing at this stage. Nothing that we need to be concerned about as a committee.
Yeah, we got some observations, which if you allow, I'd rather discuss it first with management.
Okay.
Yep.
No, yep. Okay, that's good. So nothing more from me, Julian, but as I say, I've sat on both sides of the fence, so thank you to you and your team. I know that the audit profession is still under immense pressure, and it is getting harder and harder for you guys to do what you do. So thank you to you and your team for getting us there.
It's our pleasure, Annalisa. A few of us have been battle tested, obviously, over the last few years of the pandemic, but we are fine.
Thank you, Julie. Any questions or any comments or anything from the floor? Sam?
I had just a couple, and it was looking back at the graphs that are on page 70, actually page 68 and 70, and they don't necessarily relate to this audit as such, but they relate to standards that we're setting ourselves in as we work towards the long-term plan. And just the first is on page 68, the rates affordability measure. And I guess that's going to be a question that we ask ourselves as a council as we move into the next 10 years. And like you can just see the green line creeping ever closer to the black line, which has sat static for a long time. So I think asking ourselves what does affordable rates look like for our district, and having that measure and that question when we come to it, thinking about what is the average or median income of households in Selwyn, and having some data around how we set that number, I think going forward is going to be important, because as you can see, we're not going to be able to match keeping that flat at 3,700 if we're going to continue to increase even in the 5 or 6% lifts that we've had recently, or the 1% lift we had a couple of years ago. And the other is on the balanced budget benchmark, which is on page 70. And, you know, to me, we should be gathering what we're spending on operational expenditure every year, and that's why that sort of sits there at 100%. And this last year, it's dropped down to 84%, which, like, I sort of wouldn't mind understanding how we've got dropped so far away from that. And I'm not sure if that's a question that could be answered here, but thinking about how we fit that into our future thinking around making sure that we're not just borrowing off the future to pay for today's operations of this council, and how that looks as we step through the next long-term plan piece, which might be a question for next week rather than now, but keen, Alison, if there's an understanding there.
I think that's some additional analysis we need to do to actually tell that story and just how we present that.
Great, that's great, Sam. Anything else from the floor? It's fantastic. Thank you, Julian. That's great. Oh, sorry, Nicole.
Just wondering, because I've got some comments on the actual start of the report, and some of them are actually around our service targets, which I would assume that we're going to be reviewing those coming to the LTP. And so I have some questions of that, which I can probably feed into that process as opposed to talking about them now. But I would think I won't go through, you see in this time, the report, but is there some way that I can talk to someone about some of the things that I was wanting to raise?
We can have a conversation.
Very good. I was hoping you would say that. Thank you.
Anything else from the floor?
Just similarly along the same lines, Mr. Chair, putting together questions from last night. It's more in the realm of perhaps talking with someone through those, but just as a reflection, probably the best a question or to you, Julian, would be the progression state of council over the period of time that you've been operating fair, that we've now have a new chief executive, confident that you've seen a level of progression from last year to this year, that you're seeing good progress, and then opportunity with our new changes and new people here that will continue along those lines to support you and bring good accountability.
Well, I've had a good intro meeting with Sharon.
Yep.
So we have something in common. I'm Irish, so
I thought so.
Well, I got to say that the last several months have been very challenging, and I can see it. And my team felt it. I had reason to call and have conversations with people. So in times like that, we as auditors got to stand back and ask ourselves whether those things that are happening and the subsequent changes trigger an adverse impact on the management control environment. So we have to be very careful with our ongoing assessment because, as the old saying goes, you have the same system, sure, but they can change, but people come and go too. So in times of in challenging times like you had, sadly, the level of compliance with established policies and procedures, well, they could change, So those are the things we really got to be absolutely careful about. And I know I've had open conversations with the previous CEO, and I'm going to have open conversations with Sharon, and in fact with anybody. I'm happy to have conversations with management or elected members, so long as it concerns the audit. I can't talk about anything else. Does that help?
Yep. Yeah. Thanks very much. I appreciate the commentary. I guess lastly, it's a really good report. Just a snapshot of what I've seen and what I've had a chance to look over. It's really good to see the CEO and Mayor statement at the front, acknowledgement to past and the present, and acknowledgement to relationships. It's really nice. I think it sets a really good tone throughout the report. The commitment to EV and EV fleets is also something that's quite good to see in there. Well done to sticking to the chlorination and fluoridation. It's great to see that in there. These will be some of the key things that I see our residents looking at. Some of the highlights. And sort of page 76 around the transportation and looking at the expenditure on those types of things. It's quite quickly you see the operating expenditure of community compared to something like roads. It's always at the top of the list as a stark contrast. And I'm just wondering, events, is that events? Do they come under the operating expenditure in the community side of things? Sorry, I'll go back here.
Sorry, Shane, I'm not sure what you're asking.
Yep. So if I look at page 22, 16 on the report, and look at the operating spend of 35.3 in community services and facilities, and then look at the operating spend on transportation and roads and that type of thing is 17.6. Do events funding and that type of thing, community services and facilities come out of the operating expenditure? Comparing the differences between operating of both?
It will depend on the nature. So there's probably not a hard and fast yes or no to that. So some components will obviously be funded, some will be pure operating expenditure, but there's probably not a hard yea or nay on that one, unfortunately.
Okay, thank you. Oh, and just lastly, a good commitment to the Waihora Whātarau. I see that, and there also, hey Denise. And I'm just wondering, as a preemptive question around the bilingual signage, potentially in that report as well, making of a note of that, noting that that will be something of discussion in the communities. Thank you.
Okay. All right, anything more from the floor? Annalisa?
No, nothing more from me. Thank you.
And my intention here is to finish the meeting. Oh, sorry, there's a recommendation at the beginning, wasn't there? We need to go back to the recommendation, which was that we delegate the executive director enabling services to the authority to make alterations in minor effect or to correct the minor things of the annual report for the year. So That's something that council would give that delegation. I would imagine. Looking at you, Sam, for some guidance on that. So, is that not something the audit? Are we recommending to council that?
Yeah, we recommend to council.
Okay.
And it's council that actually approved the adoption of the annual report.
Someone like to move that we just what analysts said.
So just wait. The recommendation doesn't say that we're recommending to council.
Yes, sir.
So don't we need to have that added?
Yeah, thank you. There's a couple of components here, noting that where this is a draft and there may be some minor changes. So what we're asking this committee is to delegate any of those minor alterations, and some of those could be spelling mistakes or bits and pieces. So we do require that authority, and noting that the report is in draft form. And you're absolutely right, Nicole. There needs to be a C that the Audit and Risk Committee recommend to council or endorse the annual report to council. So there is a third recommendation missing.
But were you saying that this audit and risk committee can't delegate that authority? That's going to be done by council.
No, but we're not actually recommending it to council at the moment by what's on the recommendations, and that's what I question.
I think the recommendation needs to be that the Audit and Risk Committee recommend to full council the adoption of the 2023 annual report. But we delegate to the ED enabling services to make any minor changes. So maybe the first bit is that we delegate to the Executive Director enabling services to make any minor changes to the annual report. That's the first recommendation. So I think it's not actually too far off. And the second recommendation is that we recommend to the council the adoption of the 2023 annual report.
So what you're saying is that in both cases, we're recommending to council that they delegate the authority.
Yeah, that's one before the other. So the first one needs to be that in the next couple of days, there may be, as Alison just alluded to, there may be some minor changes, and it's more than normal for management to be able to make those without having to come back to Audit Risk Committee. You know, it might be spelling mistakes, or there might be, I don't know, a very minor unadjusted error. I'm assuming they will be very minor and probably nothing at this stage. But management needs to have that, because we don't want to have another hooey every time there's a change. So we're delegating to management to be able to make those minor changes. That's the first recommendation. And the second one is that once they have completed that, then we make the recommendation to full council that the annual report is adopted.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
Is there any questions on that? Sharon.
That was accidental. Yes, I think Annalisa summarised that beautifully.
Okay, would someone like to move that? That's our recommendation. Thanks, Shane. Seconded, Sam. Thank you. Any more conversation around that? All those in favour say aye. Aye. Against? Aye. Carried. Right. So my intention from here is to close the meeting, and then we've obviously got a PX portion here where we're going to have some auditor only time, and so I'll close and then we will move into that. I'll close with the karakia. Unihia, tapo, kia watia, ai kua watia. Thank you everyone. Thanks for bearing with the technical